Hello, everyone. Welcome to my final political and social philosophy exam video. Today's discussion or topic is regarding um, the application of uh, philosophical ideologies in government and understanding government in a more philosophical aspect, and as well as applying these philosophical um, conundrums onto real world issues which we face today or have been disputed upon many individual groups, various groups throughout history, which make the United States kind of the spotlight of the world. So essentially, I'll start off with how political and social philosophy, since the Greek philosophers era, both Eastern and Western cultures have been impacted by them. So, uh, political ideologies have been developed since, I believe, Socrates' philosophy. And one thing that makes me kind of believe this is in Socrates' apology, which was actually recorded by Plato, which was his prodigy. So Socrates essentially was a truth seeker, um, even to the point of martyrdom, where he actually would consider his life much more valuable when it was approached or fought for in a way that sought truth rather than the acceptance of his people, which did not believe his truth or want to hear anything which was true. So he essentially pursued justice in the form of truth. And Plato, recording this apology, actually, I believe, also brought along a lot of Socrates, you know, um, passions of seeking truth, and essentially apply that to his own philosophical spectrum of political arena. And we see this in Plato's Republic, where um, he first tries to define human ontology, or the being human of the human man or woman. And he believed that in our ontology, through introspect, we could find truth of any kind. So if we actually thought deep enough and hard enough, or deep enough and most passionate enough to seek truth, right, we would actually find something that would be a divine reveal. This is what he would bring about, which called epistemological introspection, or introspect epistemology that is derived from introspection, and pretty much his whole foundation or uh, philosophical foundation was developed through this belief, and he actually applied this to his government system or system of government. So introspection, in his belief, right, truth was uh, derived from within, when one, as a philosopher, thought things thoroughly, logically, and deeply, such as his instructor Socrates did. So, essentially, he came up with the point that in every aspect of government, in every type of government, right? So, not only in oligarchy, democracy, monarchy, anarchy, right? There will always be a point where there is a possibility of corruption, and in that corruption, there are systems which are circular and essentially bring about a new system. But essentially, it's a cycle of how these systems um, manifest themselves according to one being corrupted by injustice and unfaithfulness to truth. He then I believe that the application of ontology and ethics is plays a huge role in the way we actually view government and what we need in government. So, what I mean by this is, if we notice the history of philosophy, we see that not only Plato viewed ontology and ethics into the political sphere of reality, But so did Aquinas, Thomas Aquinas, of the 12th century, and John Rousseau, as well as Charles Peirce. So a little background for these historical figures. Thomas Aquinas was just a Catholic or Roman Catholic monk and theologian who was really a deep thinker and added so much to Christian theology. But his theology did derive a lot from Aristotelian philosophy. Essentially, he developed the ontological argument where the necessary to have pretty much what this apologetic essentially just means that in order to have so many things moving in the universe, we have to have one primary mover, and that mover being God. So that was essentially his apologetic methodology, which not only he didn't only just develop that, but his Summa Theologica was also a great work that he's very noted for. So, great figure in Christianity. After Thomas Aquinas, we have Jean Rousseau, which was the father of, I believe, the father of socialism, but essentially he's the father of the social contract theory. In social contract theory, he believed that mankind as one body was in charge of establishing the laws that would actually essentially bind them. And if we wanted to have freedom, or choose to be free, and his version of free was this utopian notion that one could be whatever they want. So in work, one day or 1 hour, sky's the limit. You could be a farmer, a cook, I don't know, a manager, stockbroker. Essentially, you could be anything in his utopian society. But I don't think a stockbroker really necessarily play a role in there, since he's more of a, I believe he's more of a socialist, Marxist, even though Marxism wasn't invented then, but that's another issue. And essentially, what I believe is in his notion of freedom is actually this just deprives us more of our liberty, and it even goes back to the federalist, anti-federalist issues that were around in the establishment of the United States Constitution. And what I mean by this is that Jean Rousseau gave way to a social contract that would bind humans as a complete body, where all humans essentially would be under the same rules, same laws. But these rules had to be established by one body, right? And in that body, it would be essentially a government. This actually, I believe, inspired the Federalists to have a more strong central government, while the Anti-Federalists actually fought against this and wanted more liberties, or as John Locke would call it, natural rights philosophy. And this is why we have the civil rights, or the 10 amendments in the United States Constitution, which give us more freedoms or natural rights, right? But essentially, John Rousseau's ontology was that man was actually capable of being whatever they wanted, right? He was free, or had free will, or the amount of free will to actually have a coherent view of the laws, right? He even believed that the poorest would essentially, well, he didn't believe the poorest should vote because they weren't well educated, but essentially, any person who was at least slightly educated could actually have a little bit of, ability to establish good rights or laws. And I think that this kind of goes down to the progressive movement of the early 20th century, where pragmatism, this ideology that essentially what is truth isn't necessarily what works. And this brought about a utilitarian type of ethics, which I don't necessarily agree with, but essentially gave a lot of ways into the progressive movement of that era, which brought about the importance of convenience rather than truth. So essentially, pragmatism was a very corrupt ideology that kind of, like Socrates said, right? he wanted more truth. Well, in this case, people wanted less truth and more convenience, and we see this in the pro-life, pro-choice movement of the progressives, right? So essentially, they don't care what is truth or not. They essentially just want a convenient or utilitarian notion of ethics, or whatever is convenient to them. Then okay, I want it. If it's not convenient to me, I don't want it. And essentially, the second, so pragmatism being the first ideology that has corrupted the United States government. The second is the pro-life and pro-choice movement, right? The pro-choice essentially is seeking convenience and not truth. Even when you tell them that the fetus is actually a human being, deserving of these natural rights, well, essentially, they don't care. They just want what is convenient to them. And I think this is a very dangerous ideology that will essentially affect our whole generations to come. Thank you for watching.